On a charming farm, there's a young woman named Pearl who dreams of becoming a famous actress. One day, her mom comes into her room, upset because Pearl is wearing her dress without permission. In response, her mom instructs Pearl to go to the barn and feed the cows. While in the barn, Pearl talks to the cows, sharing her aspirations of leaving the farm and making a name for herself. She playfully pretends to be on Broadway with a pitchfork in hand. Unexpectedly, a goose enters the barn, and Pearl decides to use the pitchfork to harm it. She takes the lifeless goose to the lake to feed it to Theta, the crocodile. The year is 1918, and she's shucking corn with her mother, Ruth. Pearl sees a newspaper that excites her about the end of the war, but Ruth advises her to read it after supper. Later, Pearl goes to her father, who appears quite ill in his wheelchair. They say a prayer before dinner, and Pearl is tasked with feeding her father. She later reads a letter from her husband, Howard, who is a soldier and describes the horrors of war. He expresses his desire to return home to start a life with Pearl. Afterward, Pearl informs her father that she plans to visit the theater. In a somewhat unusual moment, she bathes in front of her father. Her mother enters to ask her to pick up some medicine in town and emphasizes that she should cover her face to avoid getting sick due to a disease outbreak. In town, Pearl purchases morphine and stops by the theater to watch a motion picture. She watches with great enthusiasm while taking a sip of alcohol. She's particularly enamored by the dancing of the girls in the movie. After the screening, she reads a pamphlet about the film in an alley. A handsome man offers her a cigarette, and they strike up a conversation. He even offers to let her watch another movie for free, but Pearl must decline and leaves. However, he gives her a piece of the film she just saw and invites her to return for free showings. While riding her bike back home, the film frame slips from her pocket, and she searches for it in the cornfield but without success. She encounters a scarecrow and, in a peculiar moment, climbs it to hug it and even asks it to dance with her. After a while, she gets frustrated with it, tosses it to the ground, and starts dancing with the scarecrow's hat. Then things take an unexpected turn as she engages in intimate activities with the scarecrow. Abruptly, the scarecrow transforms into the handsome man from the theater, and Pearl screams, declaring that she's married. She tells the scarecrow to be quiet and proceeds with her activities. Birds fly away upon hearing her pleasurable screams. Back at home, Ruth is upset with Pearl for taking so long, insisting that she doesn't bring the hat inside because it may be contaminated. She also instructs Pearl to clean her father's waist. While bathing, Pearl shares the events of her day with her father and curiously wonders if he can feel pain, so she pinches him. She contemplates whether her father is still truly there or if he's like the scarecrow she was just involved with. She starts gripping her father's neck tightly, causing him to breathe heavily. Later, during dinner, Ruth questions where the rest of the money went. Pearl lies, saying she spent it on candy. Ruth tells her that she can't eat supper due to this decision. Ruth explains that times are rough, especially since they're German farmers. Germans aren't being treated nicely in America during this time period. Later, Pearl prays to God to make her the biggest star anyone has ever known. While milking the cows on the farm, Pearl's sister-in-law, Mitzi, and her mother visit. They've brought roast pig with them, and they discuss whether Howard, Pearl's husband, has sent any letters. Mitzi discreetly informs Pearl about a dance audition, where the chosen performers will tour with a group. They agree to attend the audition together, keeping it a secret from their parents. Later, when her mom is distracted, Pearl searches her mom's closet for clothes to borrow for the audition. That same night, she sneaks out of her window and finally arrives at the theater. She knocks on the door, and the projectionist lets her in, taking her to the back room. They share a drink, and Pearl tells him about her audition plans. The projectionist puts on a French film reel for them to watch. Pearl goes to the window to watch, only to discover that it's an explicit film. The projectionist explains that such films will revolutionize the industry and become legal in the States soon. He intends to capitalize on this. Pearl expresses her desire to explore the world but feels she can only do it after her parents pass away. Frustrated, she even wishes for their demise. The projectionist suggests that Pearl should go overseas after the pandemic, just like he does, to work in moving pictures like the French films. Afterward, she sneaks back into her house. She hears her mom sobbing, and this worries her. The next day, Pearl takes her dad to the lake, calling for Theta the crocodile. She talks to her dad, telling him that she'll be leaving soon, despite her love for him. Her mom suddenly appears and orders Pearl to take her dad back inside. Pearl thinks her mom hates her, but Ruth explains that she's trying to make the best of the life she was given, even though it never turns out as expected. Ruth leaves with her husband, and Pearl remains, calling for the crocodile. Pearl notices a nest with a bunch of eggs and takes one to place in the barn. While remembering her husband, she decides to crack the egg in her imagination, causing her husband to combust as well. Later at dinner, Ruth shows a pamphlet, revealing her awareness that Pearl went to see a movie. She insists that Pearl quarantine in the bunkhouse to ensure she's not sick. Pearl decides to share her audition plans with Ruth, who thinks Pearl is ungrateful. They argue, and Ruth expresses concern that others would be frightened if they saw what Pearl does in private. This escalates, with Ruth getting upset and screaming because she feels like she's become more of a mother than a wife to her husband, and she's stuck tending to him due to her duty. Ruth pulls out a knife and threatens Pearl, even threatening to kill her husband, but she doesn't follow through. Ruth tells Pearl to attend the audition and fail, hoping Pearl experiences the same sense of failure that she feels. Pearl responds that she doesn't want to become like her mother, and they continue to fight. Tragically, during the argument, Ruth's dress catches on fire, and Pearl tries to put it out with a bucket of water, but it's too late. Ruth is severely burned but still alive. Pearl decides to hide her mother in the cellar. Meanwhile, her father witnesses the entire incident. Pearl rushes out of the house to meet the projectionist. She wakes up next to him and practices her dance for the audition. The projectionist drives Pearl back home, and on the way, she spots a soldier, unsure if it's Howard because he's wearing a mask. Upon returning home, Pearl asks the man to wait outside. She then goes to apologize to her father, who is still at the dinner table. She takes him to another room and administers some medicine. Later, she allows the man to come inside to meet her father. Her father observes Pearl getting close to the man, and they eventually go upstairs to be intimate. However, they hear a strange noise, and the man stops Pearl from continuing. Pearl tells him not to investigate, but he decides to check anyway. The noise is coming from the cellar, and Pearl lies that it's just the house dog down there. To divert his attention, she decides to show him the farm animals. The man realizes Pearl's deceit when he discovers they don't have a family dog. He gets uncomfortable and makes an excuse to leave. Pearl suspects that the man may have seen something, but he denies it. Then, suddenly, she becomes possessive and begins questioning whether he will still take her to Europe. When he leaves, Pearl goes after him with a pitchfork. She stabs him twice, and he starts to flee. Pearl insists that he won't leave her on the farm. She gets him out of the car and delivers a final blow with the pitchfork. Afterward, she cleans up her father, who seems terrified of her, probably having witnessed everything. Once dressed, Pearl shows off her dress to her father, then suffocates him with a pillowcase, thanking him for everything. She disposes of the car in the lake to feed the man's body to the crocodile and eliminate the evidence. At the audition, Pearl meets up with Mitzi. Mitzi explains that only one girl will be selected from each town. Pearl loudly proclaims that it has to be her. Mitzi, nervous, switches places in line with Pearl. When it's Pearl's turn, she's confident and starts dancing on stage. Her performance involves women as soldiers, and she throws flying kisses to the audience. However, the judges thank her and reject her. Pearl snaps out of her delusion, being told that they're looking for someone younger and blonde with the X Factor. Suddenly, the judges resemble her parents and the people she killed. Pearl refuses to leave, insisting she's a star, and screams for help. Outside, she's crying when Mitzi notices her. Mitzi offers to take her home. Back at the house, Mitzi realizes that the family never ate the roast pig they brought. Pearl starts to think her mom was right all along. She confesses to Mitzi about her hope that her husband would die in the war, her infidelity with another man, and her relief at a miscarriage. Pearl feels she doesn't belong on the farm because she has no talents, isn't friendly, and has a dark past. Eventually, she admits to killing animals, her mother, and the projectionist. She just wanted to be loved, but she suddenly realizes she has confessed everything to Mitzi, who is left dumbfounded. Mitzi tries to leave, acting as if nothing's wrong, but Pearl congratulates her for getting the part. Mitzi is confused because she didn't get the part, and Pearl gets upset, thinking Mitzi is lying. Mitzi assures her she won't tell on her. Pearl follows her, grabs an axe, and starts chasing Mitzi. Mitzi screams for help but falls, and Pearl delivers a fatal blow. In a montage, it shows Pearl disposing of the bodies, feeding Mitzi's limbs and head to the crocodile, arranging her decomposing parents at the table, and preparing the rotting pig for a special dinner. Pearl prays for the food. When her husband, Howard, returns from the war, he walks into a horrifying scene with moldy food. Pearl welcomes him home with an eerie smile, while Howard looks terrified as if nothing is amiss.